Before we descend into the shadows of Hollow's grasp, if you enjoy tales of the macabre and the forgotten histories that fester in the dark corners of the world, please take a moment to subscribe to this channel. It ensures these lost histories continue to be unearthed, dragged squirming into the light. Now, lock your doors and light your lamps. The air grows cold. The year is 1895, and the fog in West Virginia clings to the mountains like a shroud. It was a fog that United States Marshal Elias Thorne had come to despise. It wasn't clean coastal fog. It was a heavy, damp blanket that smelled of wet slate, rotting wood, and something metallic, something like old blood. He'd been riding for 3 days from Charleston, his summons a terse, desperate telegraph message tucked into his waistcoat. 24 missing. Farmers. Local efforts failed. Send Marshal. Black Rock Creek. Thorne was a man of brick cities and gaslight. He believed in evidence, in motive, and in the fundamental, predictable greed or malice of men. The Appalachian valleys, these deep, isolated hollers, made his skin crawl. The people here were a different breed, insulated by the mountains, steeped in superstitions that predated the Union itself. They distrusted outsiders, or foreigners, as they called anyone from beyond the next ridge. As his horse, dutifully named Justice, navigated the treacherous, muddy track that served as the main road, the town of Black Rock Creek materialized from the gloom. It wasn't much, a dozen rough-hewn structures huddled together, a general store, a livery, a blacksmith, a saloon, and a squat gray building with a flaking sign that read Sheriff. When Thorne dismounted, the silence was absolute. No children played, no women gossiped on their porches. The only movement was a gaunt dog licking a discarded bone near the saloon steps. He tied Justice to the rail and slapped the dust and mud from his long coat. The air was thick, not just with moisture, but with a palpable, suffocating fear. He pushed open the door to the sheriff's office. The man inside looked like he'd been carved from the same gray slate as the mountains. He was old, his face a road map of worry, his star pinned to a flannel shirt that had seen better decades. He sat behind a simple pine desk, a tin cup of what smelled like chicory and whiskey in his hand. "You must be Thorne," the sheriff said, his voice a low rumble. He didn't stand. "I'm Brody. I'm the man who sent the wire." "Sheriff Brody." 24 men, Thorne said, removing his hat. He was a tall man, and the office felt small, claustrophobic. "That's not a string of bad luck. That's an exodus." Brody let out a short, bitter laugh that turned into a cough. "Exodus? No, Marshal. An exodus is when people leave. These men, they were taken, plucked, one by one, from their own fields, their own barns. Jedediah Stone was the last. 3 nights ago. His wife found his pipe still smoking on the porch rail, his mule still hitched to the plow. Jed, he just vanished." Thorne pulled out a small notebook and a pencil. "No signs of struggle? No ransom notes? No blood?" "That's the devil of it," Brody said, leaning forward. The whiskey on his breath was strong. "Nothing, just gone. It's the same every time. 24 men since the spring thaw, all strong, all farmers, men who know this land, men who wouldn't be taken easy." Thorne jotted down the names. He recognized some from the census rolls. These were the bedrock of the valley. "Who benefits, Sheriff? Land disputes? A mining company trying to scare folks off?" Brody shook his head slowly, looking down into his cup as if the answer were swimming in the dark liquid. "This ain't about land, Marshal." "Not in the way you mean." He looked up and his eyes were wide, haunted. "The folk here, they won't say it loud, but they know who's responsible. They say the disappearances started just after the sisters came back." Thorne paused, pencil hovering. "Sisters?" "The Denton Sisters." "Elara and Serafina," Brody whispered, and the name seemed to suck the last of the warmth from the room. "They live up in Hollow's grasp, their family land. It's bad land. Soured, my granddaddy used to say. They keep to themselves mostly. But the folk, they say the sisters are tending a new kind of garden." "A garden?" Thorne asked, frustration creeping into his voice. "Sheriff, I'm a federal officer, not a folklorist. What does a garden have to do with 24 missing men?" Brody pushed his cup away. "That's just it, Marshal. The folk who've gotten close enough to smell it, they say it don't smell like no garden they ever knew. It smells sweet, sickly sweet. And they say," he paused, swallowing hard, "they say the sisters are growing it using a new kind of fertilizer. They're calling it the flesh garden." Thorne spent the rest of the day attempting to pry information from the terrified populace of Black Rock Creek. It was like trying to draw water from a stone. He went to the general store, a cramped space that smelled of cured tobacco, molasses, and fear. The proprietor, a man named Silas, busied himself weighing out beans, refusing to meet the marshal's eye. "I don't know nothing about the Dentons," Silas muttered, his knuckles white as he gripped the scoop. "They trade here, same as anyone. Keep to themselves. That's all." "Trade for what?" Thorne pressed, leaning against the counter. "I'm told they live isolated. What supplies does a body need up in that hollow?" "Seed. Strange seed sometimes. Jars, lye, twine," Silas said quickly. "Nothing a body couldn't use for soap making or planting. Now, Marshal, I got inventory to count." Thorne knew a brick wall when he saw one. He moved on to the saloon. It was called the Pick and Shovel, but it was clear no one had been picking or shoveling much of anything lately. It was late afternoon, yet the bar was empty save for the barkeep wiping the same glass he'd been wiping when Thorne walked in. "A whiskey," Thorne said, sliding a coin across the bar. The barkeep, a heavy-set man with a stained apron, poured a measure of amber liquid. "You're the marshal, then?" It wasn't a question. "I am. And you're a man who hears things." "I hear the wind in the chimney," the barkeep said flatly. "I hear the creek rise, and I hear men keep their mouths shut if they know what's good for them." "What's good for them?" Thorne countered, taking a sip. The whiskey burned. 24 of their neighbors are gone. Silence doesn't seem to be good for anyone. The barkeep sighed, placing both beefy hands on the bar. "Look, Marshal, you're a by-the-book man. I can see it. You think this is a who and a why. It ain't. It's a what. The Dentons, they ain't right. Their great-grandmammy was run out of Salem, or so the story goes. Came here, where the hills are deep enough to hide anything, practiced the old ways, root magic. Witchcraft," Thorne said, the word tasting foul and medieval in his mouth. "Call it what you want," the barkeep grumbled. "All I know is Elara Denton, the pretty one, she can look at a man and he just stops. And Serafina, the other one, the one no one sees, they say she's the one who tends the plants. They say she talks to the soil, and the soil talks back." He gestured to the empty tables. "Where are the men, Marshal? They ain't at the mine. They ain't in the fields. They're in their homes, bars on the windows, rifles by the door. They're afraid of the dark, afraid of the fog, afraid of that sweet, cloying smell that rolls down from Hollow's grasp on a damp night." Thorne finished his whiskey. "And these missing men, what did they have in common?" "Nothing. Everything," the barkeep said, snatching the glass. "They were strong, healthy, good farm stock. Jed Stone, he could pull a stump with his bare hands. Thomas Miller could work a full day and dance all night. Every man taken, they were men in their prime, full of vitality." A cold dread, heavier than the fog, began to settle in Thorne's stomach. "Vitality," he repeated. "Aye," the barkeep said, turning his back. "Just the kind of thing you'd need if you were looking to grow something special." Thorne left the saloon and stood on the muddy street. The sun was setting, painting the tops of the ridges in a bloody, violent orange, but the valley below was already sinking into a deep, purple shadow. The whispers were consistent. The Dentons, the garden, the missing men's strength. He hated it. It defied logic. It defied the rational world he inhabited. But in Black Rock Creek, logic felt like a foreign currency. Here, the only currency was terror. The next morning, Thorne rode out to the Stone Farm, the last place a man had been seen alive. Sheriff Brody, looking pale and unwell, had agreed to ride with him, though his reluctance was a tangible thing, a third presence on the trail. The farm was situated in a small cove, neat and orderly. The fields were plowed, but the new shoots of corn were already starting to wither, unattended. A woman, thin as a rail and aged beyond her years, sat on the porch. This was Sarah Stone. She held a corn-husk doll, her eyes fixed on the empty track leading to the house. "Ma'am," Thorne said, approaching slowly, hat in hand. "Mrs. Stone, I'm Marshal Thorne. This is Sheriff Brody. We're here about your husband, Jedediah." Sarah Stone didn't look up. Her thumb moved over the doll's yarn hair. "He ain't here. She took him. The pretty one." "The pretty one, ma'am?" Thorne asked gently. "You mean Alara Denton?" "She came 2 days before," Sarah whispered, her voice like dry leaves. "Said she was looking for herbs. Foxglove," said Jed's heart. She heard it was strong. Said it was a good, steady beat. I told her we're God-fearing folk. She just smiled and left. But she left this." Her hand darted out to a small clay pot on the railing. In it was a single flower. Thorne had never seen anything like it. It was a deep, impossible crimson, its petals thick and waxy, almost like flesh. It was vibrant, impossibly healthy, and it gave off a faint, sweet smell. "It was on the step when she left," Sarah said. "Jed, he said it was pretty. He touched it. He liked it. He said the smell reminded him of spring. But it ain't spring, Marshal. It's the back end of summer and that thing. It ain't from around here." Thorne leaned closer. The smell was sweet, yes, but underneath it was something else. A coppery, unsettling tang, like spoiled meat and blooming roses. "And the night he went missing?" Thorne asked. "He was on the porch. I was putting our boy to bed. I heard the mule bray just once. I came out, and he was gone. His pipe, like the sheriff said, still warm." She finally looked up, and her eyes were hollowed out by grief. "But there was mud on the steps, and I smelled it again. That awful sweet smell, like her flower." Thorne walked over to the edge of the porch. He saw it. A patch of dark, rich mud, different from the clay soil of the farm. He knelt, touching it. It was damp, and it had the same sickly sweet, coppery smell as the flower. "Where did this mud come from, Mrs. Stone?" "From her," she wept, rocking the doll. "From her garden. The garden that feeds." Brody, who had been standing by the horses, suddenly gripped the saddle horn. "Marshal, we should go. The sun, it's high, but the fog's rolling in." Thorne looked up. Brody was right. A thick, white mist was pouring down from the ridge above, swallowing the valley in an unnatural, premature twilight. And carried on that fog was the scent from the flower, magnified 1,000 times. A cloying, overwhelming sweetness that made his head spin. "She's calling for more," Sarah Stone whimpered, hugging herself. "She's hungry." Thorne scraped a sample of the mud into a glass vial from his kit. He looked at the flower, its crimson petals seeming to pulse in the dimming light. He had his evidence. It wasn't a footprint. It wasn't a bullet casing. It was mud that smelled of roses and rot, and a flower that didn't belong on God's green earth. It was a thread, and it led directly to Hollow's grasp. "You're a fool, Thorne," Brody stated, his voice flat. They were back in the sheriff's office, the vial of mud sitting on the desk between them like a dead thing. "You're going up there, after dark? You might as well put your pistol in your own mouth and pull the trigger. It'd be quicker, cleaner." "I'm going now, Sheriff, precisely because it will be dark," Thorne said, checking the cylinders of his Schofield revolver. "Whatever process these women use. It seems to rely on surprise, perhaps on that fog. I'm not a farmer to be plucked from a field. I'm going armed, and I'm going as a hunter, not prey." "You don't hunt what they are," Brody spat, standing up. "You don't even know what they are. That land, it's been poisoned for 100 years. The soil up there, it's not right. Things don't grow right." "Then I'll see for myself," Thorne said, holstering his weapon. He grabbed his rifle from the corner. "You can wait for the 25th man to disappear, Sheriff, or you can watch my horse." Brody deflated, slumping back into his chair. "I won't be picking up your pieces, Marshal. When you don't come back, I'm wiring Charleston and telling them the valley is lost. Telling them to burn it. Burn it all." Thorne gave a curt nod. "Fair enough." He left the office and mounted Justice. The town was shuttered. Doors were bolted, windows barred. Kerosene lamps glowed weakly from behind drawn curtains, small islands of light in a sea of encroaching dread. He rode out of Black Rock Creek, the only sound the steady thud-clop of his horse's hooves on the damp earth. The path to Hollow's grasp was less a path than a suggestion. It wound upward, into the deepest fold of the mountains, a place the sun rarely touched. The trees, mostly hemlock and ancient skeletal oaks, grew too close together, their branches weaving a canopy that choked the last of the twilight. The air grew cold, but also humid, and the sickly sweet smell he'd caught on the fog was now a permanent fixture, growing stronger with every step. Justice became skittish, whinnying and trying to turn back. Thorn had to fight the reins, urging the horse forward. "Easy, boy, just a little further." The woods grew unnaturally silent. The crickets, the owls, the nighttime rustlings of creatures in the underbrush, all of it ceased. There was only the sound of his horse's panicked breathing and the drip of moisture from the leaves. The smell was overwhelming now, a perfume so thick he could taste it. It was dizzying. He rounded a bend, and the path opened into a clearing. It was dark, but a faint sickly luminescence seemed to rise from the ground itself, a phosphorescence that illuminated the scene. There was a cabin, small and leaning, a wisp of smoke curling from its stone chimney. But the light wasn't coming from the cabin. It was coming from the patch of land behind it. A large garden, fenced not with wood, but with sharpened stones and woven briars. And it was from here that the smell emanated, a wave of perfume and putrescence that made Thorn gag. He dismounted, tying Justice to a low-hanging branch, though the horse fought him, its eyes wide with terror. "Easy," Thorn whispered, patting the horse's neck. He drew his rifle. He moved toward the cabin, his boots sinking into the rich, damp soil. It was the same mud from Jedediah Stone's porch. He was in the right place. He stepped onto the porch of the cabin. It was swept clean. A rocking chair moved slightly in a breeze that Thorn couldn't feel. Before he could knock, the door creaked open. A woman stood silhouetted in the doorway. She was tall, impossibly graceful, and even in the gloom, he could tell she was beautiful in a way that was both startling and wrong. Her hair was midnight black, her dress simple but clean. It was Alara Denton. "Marshal Elias Thorn," she said. Her voice was not a mountain drawl. It was clear, educated, and smooth as silk. "We've been expecting you. You've come all this way. You must be so very tired." She smiled, and Thorn felt a sudden, profound weariness. A desire to sit, to rest, to lay his head down in the sweet-smelling dark. Elias Thorn fought the wave of lethargy that washed over him. It was the smell, the voice, the very air of this place. It was designed to dull the senses, to make the prey docile. He tightened his grip on the rifle, the cold grain of the walnut stock a grounding sensation. "Miss Denton," he said, his voice hard, "I'm here on federal authority. I'm investigating the disappearance of 24 men." Alara Denton's smile didn't waver. She stepped aside, gesturing into the cabin's darkness. "Federal authority. How impressive. It holds such weight down in the flatlands, I'm sure. But up here, Marshal, the only authority is the mountain, the soil, the root. Please come in. The night air is hungry." Thorn hesitated. Entering the cabin meant walking into a trap. Staying on the porch meant he was exposed. He chose the lesser of two evils, or perhaps the one that offered answers. He stepped across the threshold, his rifle held at the ready. The cabin's interior was a single large room, lit by a dozen flickering candles and a low fire in the hearth. It was meticulously clean, but utterly strange. Bunches of dried herbs and flowers hung from the rafters, not just lavender and sage, but thick, fleshy-looking roots and blossoms he couldn't identify, the same crimson as the one at the stone farm. The air was thick with their perfume, and Thorn had to consciously stop himself from breathing too deeply. "You live here alone?" he asked, his eyes scanning the shadows. "I live here with my sister," Alara said, moving to the fire. She stoked it, the flames illuminating her pale, perfect features. "Serafina. She is the shy one. She prefers the company of her plants. She is the true talent. I am merely the face of the family." "And where is your sister?" "Tending her garden, of course," Alara said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "It is her child. It requires constant care, constant feeding. Thorn's blood ran cold. Feeding? What do you feed it, Miss Denton? Ilara turned, her dark eyes pinning him. Why, what all gardens crave, Marshal. Rich soil, water, and vitality. The land here is poor. The soil is thin and rocky. Our ancestors learned that to make something extraordinary grow, you must give the soil something extraordinary in return. A tithe. A tithe of 24 men? Thorn snapped. Ilara laughed, a sound like wind chimes made of bone. Oh goodness no, 24? That is a glut. A panic. No, the mountain is subtle. It takes one, perhaps, when the harvest is poor, or when the winter is too hard. A hunter lost in the snow. A traveler who strays from the path. The land provides for us, and we provide for the land. A simple ancient bargain. That's murder, Thorn said, leveling the rifle. Is it? Ilara walked toward him, utterly unafraid of the gun. What is it when you slaughter a hog for sustenance? What is it when you pull a carrot from the earth, ending its life so you may live? We are all part of a cycle, Marshal. You, me, the farmers, the garden. It simply accelerates the process. It transforms base flesh into beauty, into life. She was close now. He could smell her. She smelled of the garden, of that sweet, coppery rot. Jedediah Stone, Thorn said, his voice a low growl. Thomas Miller, all of them. They were invitations, Ilara said, her voice dropping to a hypnotic whisper. The garden grew hungry, more hungry than I have ever known it. It craved. It sent its fragrance on the fog, and the strongest, the most vital. They heard its call. They came. They walked right up the path, just as you did, Marshal. They came to donate to the soil. And the flower? The one you left for Jed? A gift, she smiled. A small piece of the garden's beauty to welcome him, to make him receptive. You've been breathing its pollen since you left Black Rock Creek, Marshal. Don't you feel it? The weariness, the desire to just rest, to plant yourself. Thorn did feel it. His rifle felt heavy. His eyelids felt heavy. He saw the door, the promise of escape, but it seemed a mile away. You're strong, Ilara whispered, raising a hand to his cheek. Her skin was cold, like marble. So much vitality. The garden would sing for you. Serafina would be so pleased. You would be the prize of her collection. Thorn jerked his head back, shoving her away. Where are they? Where are the men? Where all good harvests go? Ilara said, her smile fading, her eyes hardening. They are in the garden, Marshal. They are the garden. A sound came from outside, a low, wet, shuffling sound. Ah, Ilara said, clasping her hands. Serafina is here. She's come to see the new addition. The back door of the cabin scraped open. Thorn spun, bringing his rifle to bear. The figure that entered was a nightmare. If Ilara was impossible beauty, this was impossible nature. Serafina was shorter, thicker, and caked in the same dark, glistening mud from the garden. It clung to her hair, her simple dress, her very skin. Her face was broad and flat, her eyes a pale milky green, like new leaves. She didn't look human. She looked like something that had been dug up. She carried a large, primitive-looking sickle, its curved blade stained not with rust, but with a dark, greenish-black ichor. She looked at Thorn, not as a person, but as a farmer might look at a prize steer. A low, guttural sound, half hum, half growl, emanated from her throat. Sister, look, Ilara said, her voice lilting. A marshal. He's come to see your work. He's so vibrant. Serafina took a shuffling step forward, raising a hand caked in mud. Thorn saw that vines, thin and green, were wrapped around her arm. Not on it, but in it. They seemed to emerge from her very flesh. She was less a gardener and more a part of the garden itself. Stay back! Thorn yelled, the sound flat and dead in the small cabin. Serafina hissed and lunged. She was unnaturally fast. She didn't go for him, but for the rifle. The sickle swung down, not at his chest, but at the wooden stock of the gun. The blade bit deep. and a corrosive, acidic sap steamed where it made contact. The wood of the rifle wilted and softened like rotten fruit. Thorn roared, pulling the trigger. The shot was deafening in the enclosed space. The bullet struck Serafina in the shoulder. It was not the reaction he expected. There was no blood. A thick, green, viscous sap pulsed from the wound. Serafina didn't scream in pain. She shrieked in fury. The wound began to close almost immediately, small tendrils of plant matter weaving themselves over the hole. "Guns are ineffective, Marshal," Ilara said, her voice tight with annoyance. "Iron is distasteful, but lead is just another mineral. The garden loves minerals." Thorn threw the ruined rifle at Serafina, using the motion to draw his Schofield. He fired again, aiming for the head. Serafina ducked, the bullet punching through the cabin wall. Thorn didn't wait to see if it worked. He ran. He burst out the front door, gasping for the fresh air. But the air out here was worse. It was the concentrated perfume of the garden. He heard the sisters behind him. He had to see it. He had to know. He rounded the side of the cabin, revolver in hand, and stopped dead. The garden. It was perhaps an acre, fenced by the sharp briars, and it was glowing. A sickly, pale green bioluminescence pulsed from the earth, from the very plants themselves. The plants were grotesque, alien. Thick, waxy-leafed monstrosities that grew in impossible abundance, bearing the crimson, flesh-like flowers. Roots, thick as a man's arm, lay exposed on the ground, pulsing in a slow, steady rhythm, like 100 hearts beating at once. And he saw them, the men. They were not in the garden. They were the garden, 24 men, or what was left of them. They were planted, buried to their waists or chests in the rich dark soil. Their clothes were rotted away, their skin pale and translucent. Their eyes were open, vacant, staring up at the starless, foggy sky. Thorn saw Jedediah Stone. His mouth was open, and from it a thick flowering vine had grown, its crimson blossoms nodding in the non-existent breeze. He saw another man, Thomas Miller, his arms outstretched, his fingers fused with the earth, as if he had become a root system himself. Their chests barely moved, but the ground around them vibrated, as if a great slow heart beat beneath the soil. They were alive, they were conscious, and they were feeding this abomination. The flesh garden was not a metaphor, it was a nursery. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Ilara's voice came from behind him. "The transformation. They give their base substance, and in return they become part of something eternal, something divine." Thorn felt bile rise in his throat. He turned, leveling his revolver. "You, monster." "I am a gardener, Marshal," Ilara hissed, her beautiful face contorting. "And you are the fertilizer." Serafina burst from the shadows, the sickle raised high, her green sap wound already a mere scar. Thorn didn't think. He reacted. As Serafina lunged with the sickle, he fired his Schofield, not at her, but at the ground just in front of her. The bang and the spray of rock and dirt made her flinch, her plant-like instincts recoiling from the sudden violence. It was all the time he needed. He sprinted, not back toward the path, but along the edge of the horrifying garden. "Justice!" he roared, praying his horse hadn't broken free. "He won't come, Marshal!" Ilara's voice pursued him, calm and mocking. "The animals know. They fear the soil." Thorn risked a glance back. Ilara was standing at the edge of the garden, her hands raised, as if conducting an orchestra. Serafina was bounding after him, moving with an unnerving, loping gait. He reached his horse. Justice was panicked, rearing and pulling at the reins, his eyes white. "Easy, boy, easy," Thorn yelled, fumbling with the knot. Serafina was closing. He didn't have time. He pulled his knife and sawed through the leather rein. He vaulted into the saddle just as Serafina's sickle whistled through the air where he had been. The horse screamed, a sound of pure terror, and bolted. It didn't need the path. It crashed through the underbrush, downhill, away from the hollow, away from the smell, away from the things that lived in the dark. Branches whipped Thorn's face and tore at his coat. He lost his hat. He clung to the horse's neck, the single rein all but useless. He could hear, even over the crashing of his mount, a high-pitched, furious shriek from the hollow, a sound of frustration that was both human and sickeningly floral. He didn't slow until the horse's lungs were burning and the air began to thin, the cloying perfume replaced by the clean, sharp smell of pine and cold stone. Justice finally stumbled to a halt, foam flying from his mouth, his flanks heaving. Thorne slid from the saddle, his legs shaking so badly he almost collapsed. He had survived. He had seen it. He leaned against a tree, vomiting the whiskey and the fear from his stomach. He was alive, but he'd left 24 men, planted in that unholy ground. He made his way back to Black Rock Creek on a limping, terrified horse, arriving just as the first weak light of dawn was breaking. He looked like a haint himself, covered in mud, his face scratched, his eyes wide and vacant. He stumbled into the sheriff's office. Brody was asleep, his head on his desk, next to the empty tin cup. He woke with a start, fumbling for his pistol. "Thorne?" he gasped, seeing the marshal's state. "My God, you're alive." They're in the garden, Brody," Thorne rasped, collapsing into the chair. "They're part of it, alive. They're growing." Brody's face, which had held a flicker of hope, went gray again. He sat down heavily. "So, it's true. All the whispers. It's true. It's worse," Thorne said, his voice trembling. They're conscious." A knock came at the door, small and timid. Both men jumped. Brody drew his gun. "Who's there?" "It's just me, Sheriff," a cracked old voice replied. "Granny Mullins. I heard the marshal's horse. I saw him ride in. I reckon he's seen it. And I reckon he needs to hear the rest." Brody unbarred the door. The woman who entered was ancient, her face a spiderweb of wrinkles. She was the town's midwife, its healer, the one who knew the old ways that didn't involve planting people. She carried a small bundle of dried herbs. "You're a fool, Marshal, for going up there," she said, her eyes sharp and clear. "But you're alive, which means they let you go. Or, you're tougher than you look." "They let me go because my horse was faster than that thing," Thorne said. "Seraphina," Granny Mullins spat. "She was always the one, too close to the earth. She's more root than girl now." "But you're wrong, Marshal. If Alara wanted you, she'd have rooted you to the porch." "What do you know about this?" Thorne demanded. Granny Mullins sat, her movement slow. "I know the history, Marshal. The history this town likes to forget. The Dentons, their bargain. It ain't new. It's as old as the mountains. And it wasn't always a curse." She looked at Brody, then at Thorne. "My great-grandmammy told me. The first Dentons came here in the 1700s. The land was hard. People starved. The winters. They killed the children. The land wouldn't give. So, the first Denton witch, she made it give. She found a place, a thin place, in that hollow. A place where the quick and the dead and the green all touch. She made a bargain." "A bargain," Thorne repeated, his stomach tightening. "Aye. The land would provide. Her garden would grow remedies for any ill. It would cure the blight. It would stop the fever. It would heal the sick. In return, the land had to be paid. It needed a tithe, a strong life, once every few years. A volunteer who would go and tend the garden forever, to give his vitality back to the soil so the rest could live." "You're saying the town sacrificed people?" Thorne was horrified. "It was an understanding," Granny Mullins said, her gaze unwavering. "A hard choice in a hard land, Marshal. One life. For the health of the whole valley. It worked. For generations. The Dentons were respected. Feared, aye, but respected. Their garden saved this town from the flux, from the consumption, from a dozen other plagues." What changed?" Thorne asked. "Alara and Seraphina," the old woman said, her voice dropping. "Their parents died. The girls went away, to the old country, some say, to learn. When they came back, they were different. The garden was different. It wasn't satisfied with one. It grew greedy. Alara, she has a taste for power. She's not serving the bargain, Marshal. She's using it. She's not just feeding the land, she's feeding herself. She's making the garden grow, making it demand more. And this time, it demanded 24. The revelation hung in the air, heavier and more toxic than the fog from the hollow. The town wasn't just a victim, it was a conspirator, a silent partner in its own violation, trapped by a history of dark bargains. An understanding, Thorne said, disgust plain in his voice. You're telling me this town, Sheriff, you knew? Brody couldn't meet his eyes. He stared at the floor. I knew the stories. I knew my granddaddy said to leave the Dentons be. I knew they made poultices that worked when the doctor's medicine didn't. I didn't know this. I didn't know they planted them. You knew enough to be scared, Thorne accused. You knew enough to let it happen. What was I to do, Marshal? Brody's voice cracked. Arrest them? On what charge? Witchcraft? Who would I send up that hollow to get them? My deputies? Finn or Jed? Oh wait, they're gone. It was a balance, see? A terrible, awful balance. And so long as it was just one every few years, a lost traveler, we looked away. We had to. You don't live in these hills without knowing there are things you don't poke. 24 pokes, Sheriff, Thorne said bitterly. It's poked. Granny Mullins leaned forward, her sharp eyes on Thorne. The boy's right, Marshal. The balance is broken. Ilara, she's not just taking, she's hoarding. She's using that vitality to change things, to make herself more, to make her sister less human. The garden's power is growing, and so is its appetite. It won't stop at 24. It'll take the town. Then it'll take the next valley. The fragrance. It'll spread. Thorne stood, pacing the small office. His mind, trained in logic and law, was struggling to build a cage of reason around this horror. So the sisters, they're not just murderers. They're parasites, and the garden is their weapon. And their defense, Granny Mullins added. That garden, it's them, and they are it. The life from those men, it flows into Ilara and Serafina. It's what keeps Ilara so beautiful. It's what makes Serafina so strong. You can't kill them, Marshal. Not while the garden lives. Then the garden dies, Thorne said, his voice flat and cold. Brody looked up, his eyes wide. You're going back? I'm ending this, Thorne said. I'm not leaving those men like that. He turned to Granny. You know the old ways. You know their magic. How do I kill a garden that's alive and feeding? Granny Mullins was silent for a long moment. Fire, she said simply. But not just any fire. Kerosene. It'll burn the leaves, but not the root. Not the soul of it. The root is deep. It's in the men. What then? Iron, she whispered. Cold iron. The old magic. The green magic. It hates iron. It's of the earth, but it's not of the earth. Iron. It poisons it. Like lye. It burns it. Cold. Thorne looked at Brody. The blacksmith. Get me every scrap of iron he has. Shavings. Old nails. Broken bits of plow. Everything. Get me rock salt. Get me lye. And get me every can of kerosene in this town. What's the plan, Thorne? Brody asked, standing, a new desperate hope in his eyes. You said it yourself, Sheriff, Thorne said, the exhaustion replaced by a cold, hard rage. You burn it. You burn it all. But first, you poison the roots. He went to the back room of the sheriff's office, where old records were kept. I need proof, he muttered to himself. I need something for the report. Something sane. He pulled out a dusty, leather-bound ledger, the county record book from decades past. He flipped through the brittle, yellowed pages, past birth records and land deeds. And then he found it. It was a page from 1855, a list of disbursements for the county, and near the bottom, a cryptic entry. For services rendered, heal-all and feverfew, 1 tithe paid to the Hollow. J. Denton. He flipped further. 1860. For Blight Ward, 1 tithe paid. J. Denton. A pattern. A quiet clinical record of human sacrifice, hidden amongst payments for grain and lumber. This wasn't just superstition. It was policy. He tore the pages from the book. This was his evidence. This was the sin he was here to erase. He tucked the pages into his coat. "Brody," he yelled, "get the iron." As Thorne and Brody began to rally the town's few remaining able-bodied men, which amounted to the blacksmith, the barkeep, and Silas from the general store, a new, more chilling development occurred. Deputy Finn, a young, earnest man of 19 who had been conspicuously absent, was found to be missing. His mother, a frantic widow, ran to the sheriff's office, clutching a familiar object in her hand. A single, perfect, crimson flower. "It was on his pillow," she wailed. He said he was going to check the ridgeline. He said he heard a noise. He took his rifle. He never came back. That was hours ago, Sheriff." Thorne felt a cold spike of dread. Finn wasn't a farmer. He wasn't a robust laborer. He was a lawman. "She knows," Thorne said, his voice grim. "She knows we're planning something. This isn't a harvest, Brody. This is a message. This is a trap." "Finn, oh Lord, not that boy," Brody whispered, his face ashen. "She's luring us," Thorne said, his mind racing. "She took Finn. She's taken a deputy. She's challenging my authority. She wants me to come back, but she'll be waiting this time." "Then we don't go?" Silas, the storekeep, asked, his voice hopeful. He held a bag of rock salt as if it were a shield. "No," Thorne said. "We go now. We go while she's expecting us to be afraid. We go while she's still processing her new victim." The word tasted like ash. Just then, the front door of the sheriff's office swung open. It wasn't a frantic townsperson. It was Alara Denton. The room froze. Brody dropped the bag of iron nails he was holding. The blacksmith let out a low, strangled moan. Alara stood in the doorway, bathed in the gray afternoon light. She was beautiful, and the sight of her in the middle of their town, in their sanctuary, was the most terrifying thing Thorne had ever witnessed. She wasn't hiding. She was hunting. She carried a small basket. "Sheriff Brody," she said, her melodic voice filling the room. "You look unwell. The worry, it's so taxing on the heart." She took a step inside. The men recoiled, pressing against the back wall. "Marshal Thorne," she said, her eyes finding him. "You left in such a hurry. You didn't even stay for supper. And you broke my sister's favorite sickle. She is very displeased." "Get out," Thorne said, his hand on his revolver. "Oh, I'm not here for that," she said, smiling. "I'm here for supplies." She walked, bold as brass, past Thorne and placed her basket on the desk. "I need lye and twine. Silas, you have them, don't you?" Silas, trembling, nodded. "Aye, Miss Denton, at the store." "Good," she said. She turned back to Thorne. Her gaze was intense, hypnotic. "You've been stirring up my neighbors, Marshal. You've been filling their heads with fear, when all we have ever offered is health. We've cured this valley for 100 years. "You culled it," Thorne corrected, his voice a low snarl. "A tithe is a tithe," she shrugged, delicate and deadly. "But I didn't come here to argue theology with a government man. I came..." She reached into her basket and pulled out a small, expertly woven poultice to offer a truce. She held it out to him. It smelled incredible. Not of the garden's rot, but of pine and mint and clean rain. "You're tired, Marshal," she whispered, and her voice seemed to be inside his head. "You're hurt. You're frightened. You're alone. Take this. It will steady you. It will clear your head." Thorne stared at the poultice. He was tired. His body ached from the ride. His mind was fractured from the horror. He felt an overwhelming urge to accept, to let the medicine work. "What is it?" he managed to say. "A gift. From the heart. of the garden. She smiled. A show of good faith. Take it. Let us end this. The mountain has been fed. It is sated for now. Your deputy was a fine contribution, so full of spirit. Thorn looked at her cold, beautiful face, and he saw the lie. The garden was never sated. She was never sated. This wasn't a truce. It was a test. He slapped the poultice from her hand. It hit the floor, bursting open, releasing a small puff of sweet, glittering pollen. Ilara's smile vanished. For a single, frozen second, her face contorted into something ancient and wrathful, a mask of pure, possessive rage. The illusion of the beautiful woman was gone, replaced by the thing that lived beneath. She recovered instantly. "What a pity," she said, her voice like ice. "Such a waste. Very well, Marshal. If you will not accept our hospitality, then you must accept our invitation." "I'm not going anywhere, witch," Brody spat from the corner. "Oh, you're not invited, Sheriff," Ilara said, turning her burning gaze on him. "You are dry, tainted. The garden wants vibrancy, strength." Her eyes snapped back to Thorn. "But he is. Come to the garden tonight, Marshal. Come alone. Come and negotiate for the release of your deputy. He is newly planted. He might be saved." She turned and glided from the room, leaving the door open, the scent of the spilled pollen hanging in the air. The men were silent. "It's a trap," the blacksmith finally croaked. "Of course it's a trap," Thorn said, kicking the pollen pouch into the corner. He looked at the four men, their faces a mixture of terror and grim resolve. "And it's one I'm going to walk right into." "You can't be serious, Thorn," Brody insisted, pacing the office as the sun began to dip, casting long, fearful shadows across the town. "She told you it's a trap. She's waiting for you." "I know," Thorn said. He was methodically loading his pockets, not with bullets but with handfuls of coarse rock salt. "She's waiting for me. She's arrogant. She thinks I'm just another man to be charmed and planted. She's not expecting us." "Us?" Silas quavered, holding a gallon can of kerosene. "She invited me alone," Thorn said, "which means her attention will be on me. That's our chance. That's your chance." He unrolled a crude map of the valley that Brody had. He pointed to the hollow. "The path I took is the only way in by horse. It's the front door. That's where I'll go. Ilara will meet me there. Serafina, the gardener, she'll be waiting in the garden itself. But," he traced a finger along the high, sheer ridge that formed the back of the hollow. "Granny Mullins told me. There's an old goat track. Comes down the back. It's steep. It's treacherous. But it overlooks the garden." He looked at Brody, the blacksmith, Silas, and the barkeep. "I will be the lure. I will draw them both to the front. To me. While I have them occupied, you four, you will come down that ridge. You will be above them, and you will dump everything you have onto that unholy ground. Poison it," the blacksmith, whose name was Cole, said. His voice was grim. He held a heavy sack filled with iron shavings and bent nails. "Exactly," Thorn said. "You douse it in kerosene. You cover it in salt and lye and iron. You poison it. You make it unlivable. Granny said iron is poison. You give it the poison. When you're done, you light it. And what about the men?" Brody asked, his voice low. "What about Finn? They're in there." Thorn's face hardened. He walked to the window and looked out at the dying light. "The men you knew, Jedediah, Thomas, Finn, they are gone. The things in that garden, they are vessels. They are fuel. You will be releasing them. What we are doing, it's a mercy." The four men looked at each other. There was no courage in their faces, only a deep, abiding terror and a flicker of shame. the shame of men who had looked away for too long. We'll do it, Brody said, his voice firming. For Finn and for the rest. Good, Thorne said. Now, the iron. He took the heavy sack from Cole. He pulled out his own knife, a standard-issue marshal's blade. This isn't enough, he said. He looked at Granny Mullins, who had been watching from the corner. Granny, and you said cold iron burns them. How personal does it have to be? Granny Mullins stepped forward. The green fears the blood of the earth, Marshal. The iron that man has tamed. The will of man, forged in fire. It has to be wielded. Thorne understood. He took his knife, his revolver, and even a spare cylinder. He handed them to Cole, the blacksmith. Cole, take these, and your hammer. Do whatever it is you do. Make them ready. We're not just fighting plants. We're fighting magic. Cole nodded, a dark understanding in his eyes. I know, an old quenchant. My granddaddy taught me. A witch quenching. Salt and faith. Do it, Thorne said. He turned to the others. Get the kerosene, get the lye, get to the ridge. Wait for my signal. What's the signal? The barkeep asked, his hands shaking. Thorne picked up his rifle, the one Serafina had bitten with her sickle. The wood was still soft, decayed. He broke the ruined stock off, leaving him with a sawed-off heavy barrel. You'll hear it, Thorne said. When I fire this, the first time, you start pouring. When I fire the second time, you light the match. He looked at the men one by one. Don't hesitate. Don't look at what's in the garden. Just burn it. Burn it all. They nodded, a grim, silent pact. They gathered their burdens, the cans of kerosene, the bags of salt and iron, and slipped out the back door, ghosts in their own town, climbing toward the ridge in the twilight. Thorne was alone, save for Granny Mullins. They'll be waiting for you, she said. I know, Thorne replied. Alara, she'll try to talk to you. Her voice, it's a hook. Don't listen. I won't. She reached into her apron and pulled out a small, simple-looking charm. It was a shard of an old, rusted plow blade wrapped in leather. Keep this in your pocket, close to your skin. It's cold iron. It'll help remind you who you are. Thorne took it. The metal was frigid, and it seemed to hum in his hand. He slipped it into his waistcoat pocket. Thank you, he said. He checked his revolver. Cole had returned it. The metal seemed darker, sharper. He holstered it. He hefted the ruined rifle. He walked out of the sheriff's office and into the night. He didn't take justice. The horse had been through enough. He would walk. He would walk up the path to Hollow's grasp one last time, as the last sliver of the moon disappeared behind the fog. The walk to Hollow's grasp was a journey into the heart of a nightmare. The silence was profound, broken only by the crunch of his own boots on the damp earth. The cloying, sweet smell of the garden rolled down the path to meet him, a sickly sweet welcome mat. It was stronger this time, almost excited. He felt the garden before he saw it. A pressure in his skull, a pulling sensation in his stomach, a deep primal urge to lie down, to rest, to join the soil. The pollen was thick in the air, a visible, luminescent mist in the gloom. He pulled his handkerchief over his mouth and nose, but it did little. He felt the cold iron charm in his pocket, a small anchoring point of reality. He focused on it. I am Elias Thorne. I am a marshal. I am here to end this. He rounded the final bend. The hollow was alive. The garden was pulsating with that awful green phosphorescence. It was brighter. The crimson flowers. There were more of them, and he saw Finn. The young deputy was planted near the front, his eyes wide, his mouth open. A new, small, green tendril just beginning to sprout from his tongue. Alara stood in the center of the path, bathed in the garden's sickly light. She was wearing a simple white dress. She looked like a high priestess. "You came," she said. Her voice, it was everywhere. It seemed to come from the trees, from the soil, from inside his own head. "I knew you would. The strong ones. They're always so brave." "Where is your sister?" Thorne said, his voice muffled by the cloth. He kept his ruined rifle pointed at the ground. He needed his hands free for later.